Final Fantasy XIV versus other MMOs. I'm curious now.
Greetings, travelers. I'm here to answer the most complicated and ancient of questions that our ancestors had once proposed. People often debate about various things: Mac versus PC, Android versus Apple, PlayStation versus Xbox,
You know what? Like PlayStation versus Xbox, that's such a big topic. Because they're like both, like what's interesting about Xbox and PlayStation, that's my personal opinion, they're both on the same level when it comes to quality and the way the games look and play on them. Like this is like the biggest debate of like the century or something like that. Like everyone is like discussing it. What's better, Xbox or PlayStation? You know, that's a big thing.
Xbox, politics, religion. But all of that pales in comparison to the only question ancient philosophers could never answer. Which MMORPG is better? World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV? You want to know the answer? Can I get a drum roll, please?
Let's go.
It's who fucking gives a shit. You know what makes me want to stick my nutsack into a blender? When people act like these are the only two games on the entire planet. Or you can always take it a step further and act like you can't play both of these games at the same time.
Who actually started this kind of comparison of World of Warcraft versus Final Fantasy XIV? Like, was it Asmongold? Was it Preach? Like who was that actually? Like, I know it all started with freaking Twitch and like how some bigger streamers like from World of Warcraft tried Final Fantasy XIV after some people said, hey, you should try this, it's a good MMO. And then like some people moved from World of Warcraft to Final Fantasy XIV. And then suddenly like hundreds of videos appeared on YouTube like World of Warcraft versus Final Fantasy XIV. I quit World of Warcraft for Final Fantasy XIV. Or was it Zeppla? Like, who actually started this? Like, I'm wondering. Because, like, there are multiple sources that could be the beginning, but maybe it was, I don't know, maybe Zeppla and then Asmongold or something, and then, like, everyone went for it, including Preach. Like, I don't know, but it's a hot topic. And yeah, by the way, guys, if you are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more MMO content. Yo, I'm curious what else Misshapen Chair has to say.
If you play one, you can't play the other in any capacity. It's literally impossible. More impossible than Titanium normal. I think I have a slightly different perspective on the class war here, so let me tell you a story. I don't like MMORPGs. That might shock people given how much time I put into a certain Cat Girl Paradise MMORPG, but it's true. My favorite game genre at this point is probably JRPGs. Stuff like Persona, SMT, and Nier, not usually Final Fantasy. You know I like this stuff when I can play something from the genre, hate it, and still get rock hard at the ending because they summon a spirit bomb to defeat God. But I also like other games such as Shadow of the Colossus, Disco Elysium, Sekiro. I don't just like fun. JRPGs. There is one little genre of game I can never get into.
You know what's interesting? And I sometimes feel the same way. Like, sometimes you will see me play, like, other games, like, not an MMO, but something like Minecraft, for example. And this actually helps me to not get burnt out. Like, if you're a content creator, usually you spend, like, depending on how serious you take it, you spend a lot of time covering a certain game or genre. And if you spend too much time into doing one thing, you could get burnt out or, like, tired of it, right? So I feel like a lot of content creators that have like a certain channel, especially dedicated to like a single game, like they have to play other games to not get burnt out. At least I have to do that sometimes. Like if I play every day, let's say World of Warcraft, for example, I would get burnt out. Like I'm happy that I play multiple games. Like sometimes I'll be on World of Warcraft, sometimes I'll be on Final Fantasy XIV, sometimes I will play some Minecraft, maybe sometimes I will jump on some Overwatch or Call of Duty and shoot my frustration out or something. No, like I'm kidding, but like seriously, it's very, very good to, if you're focusing on one thing, to sometimes look the other way and do something else. Like it helps you. It makes you feel so much better about yourself.
Sekiro, I don't just like JRPGs. There is one little genre of game I can never get into though, and that's MMOs. You'll often hear great stories about how people don't like version 1.0 of Final Fantasy XIV because of how bad it was. Well, I got a newsflash for you. I played version 2.0 and I fucking hated it.
Why?
I thought the game was garbage. Why? Because it took me forever to level. I had to do all the side quests to progress the MSQ, which rewarded me with a garbage story that any other generic JRPG could have offered me. I also had to level a second class to get my job, and once I unlocked everyone's favorite job, Scholar, I still would have had to go grind out a bunch of other cross-class skills to make things function. And I quit the game. This right here is the reason why I have such a strong vendetta against everything A Realm Reborn. It is ingrained into my very being. Nothing but pure spite and hatred. That should explain to you why I'm so incredibly biased against A Realm Reborn specifically. So when my friends wanted to play Final Fantasy XIV again, I didn't want to get anywhere near it. But they managed to convince me that I might like it now, when now referred to previous expansion. So I came back to the game, and lo and behold, I liked it. When people talk about changes to Final Fantasy XIV to make the game more accessible to...
You know what's interesting about Final Fantasy XIV? And that's something I have not seen in a single MMO these days. Like, usually a lot of MMOs start like this. They're super hyped. They're like really popular. A lot of players play them. And as the expansions come out after another, like we've seen this with World of Warcraft and Elder Scrolls Online, the player base actually decreases, right? Like, so every expansion, they maybe decrease by 5 to 10% sometimes. Like, yeah, the first, of course, like the first week of an expansion, even the second and third week, like it's crazy hyped. A lot of players are even coming back that quit the previous version of the game. But after like a couple of weeks, they leave again. And in total, there's like 5% less players than there were before, right? For example. And I've seen this a lot happen to like games like Elder Scrolls Online, for example, where there was like one expansion, and then you had like, let's say in my guild, for example, there were like 200 people online. Then by the time a new expansion came out, there were just 170. And then I looked on Google Trends and everywhere, and you saw actually that the game is decreasing in popularity, and even the active player numbers went down. But Final Fantasy XIV did something unimaginable, something crazy. As the expansions came out after another, the population actually increased. There were more and more active player base. Like the player base, they grew. So the first version of the game sucked. The second version sort of sucked. The third sucked a little bit. The fourth sucked very little. It's kind of like it like evolved, and this is something that's crazy. I've not seen any other MMO do that except for Final Fantasy XIV, one that actually ages so well. Like Final Fantasy XIV is one of those games that aged the best, in my opinion.
Casual players, I am literally the poster child. I am a prime example of why these changes were probably a good thing. I often hear this rampant and vapid take that Final Fantasy XIV is a bad MMO, although it's a good JRPG. And to that I say, the only reason that you think it's a bad MMO is because you have a terrible idea of what makes a good MMO. You've been conditioned after years of abuse, and Final Fantasy XIV is like rehab. You see, it doesn't take that long to level in Final Fantasy XIV anymore. You can level a single job all the way to max by playing through the campaign, probably with the English dub so you can understand all the memes instead of the JP dub that you used since the beginning. You can't relate to 99% of the Western fan base.
That's true. And yeah, by the way, what I love about Final Fantasy XIV leveling, and especially if you like a main job, like a main class you love to play, you can just do the main story and you already get to max level. In other MMOs, you need to do so many side missions, and you need to like sometimes do even like dailies for like XP boosts and stuff like that. It's crazy how like grindy some MMOs are, where you have to do so much side stuff to keep up and even progress with like the main story. Like the cool thing about like Final Fantasy XIV is you don't have to grind besides the main story if you want to max. Like all you do is, as a new player, you look at a class that you like. Oh, you want to be a Black Mage main? Then sure, pick Black Mage. And then from then on, you're a Thaumaturge, you become a Black Mage. You can just play the campaign and stick to that one job. And you will be maxed by the time you have beaten everything, like even Endwalker. And that's beautiful, I think. Like, it's less grindy. And you can enjoy the story from the beginning. With other MMOs, maybe for 2 days you can progress in the story because you need to level up.
It can take a little while to finish the MSQ if you want to pay attention to the plot.
It's a big MSQ,
but if you
long.
skip everything, it doesn't take that long.
No, don't
I would know. I've played through the plot 3 times. I'm not giving you a specific time estimate, but my conclusion is that the time it would take is astronomically shorter than the amount of time it would take to reach max level in any other MMORPG. The director, Naoki Yoshida, Jesus Christ himself, said that that's very intentional. Rather than just repeating my opinion over and over again, I will give you an example. Let's say that you're a World of Warcraft player, and you want to play Final Fantasy XIV. You don't care about the JRPG story, you just want to do all the hard raiding content. So you ask someone, how hard would it be to start getting into the hardest content, which would probably be the current Savage raid tier and all of the ultimates. That's what you personally want to get out of the game, this small little slice. I'd say if you want to level manually, it's not going to take you that long, but if you boost, it will take you literally 0 hours to level and start running 3 of the ultimates. And it won't take you more than 20 to 30 hours at most to reach max level and buy a...
But I would not boost. I've experienced something, and I've seen this like with other streamers and stuff. Like, those that actually boost a character, they tend to not stick with the game for some reason. Like, I've seen people boost, they would play Final Fantasy XIV for a couple of months, and then they would quit. I feel like because if you boost, that's like my opinion, you don't get really attached to the world. Like, the grind actually attaches you to a game. The more you grind and the more time you invest, and that's the thing about like MMOs, why some MMOs have such long time players, is if you dedicate yourself emotionally with like the grind and also like forming friendships, especially for like low level and stuff, you sometimes will need some help to do stuff or like for dungeons and things, right? So you bond with the world, your character and all, and you get attached to it. And if you boost in an MMO, you don't get such strong attachment to the game, in my opinion. So that's why I always say don't boost, just grind. Like, it's gonna take a couple of weeks for you, depending how much time you have that you can invest into the game. But if you invest several weeks into like maxing and everything, you're gonna be really attached and you're gonna enjoy the game way more than you're looking for a fast way to max like that. I don't think it's good. It's not worth it because you're gonna leave the game after several months anyway, probably. But if you grind, maybe you stay for years.
Hours to level and start running 3 of the ultimates. And it won't take you more than 20 to 30 hours at most to reach max level and buy a gear set to start running the current Savage tier. You will have to farm some Savage fights to gear up for the next ultimate that's coming out, which can take a varying amount of time.
Wow.
But if you're putting in the effort into playing your job well and learning all the mechanics, it's not going to take forever. Especially if you're someone who's willing to learn and improve and grind it out. Now, this phenomenon is not really hypothetical. We've seen players come over from WoW and start running all the Savage and Ultimates, and it's great to see how easy it was for them to start getting their ass kicked. You'll end up spending the majority of your time learning the fights rather than leveling. Or by applying the transitive property, you spend the majority of your time doing the stuff that you want to do. There isn't a giant pile of chores to get in the way of the content that you want to participate in, even if you don't boost. Like, yeah, the MSQ is long and boring at times, but it pales in comparison to any other MMORPG. It was honestly pretty sad to see this cool and very interesting phenomenon with WoW players coming over and trying out Final Fantasy high-end raids, very unique, and many wanted to bring some Final Fantasy XIV.
You know what? I prefer the main story of Final Fantasy XIV over the main story of World of Warcraft. And the reason why is Final Fantasy XIV has at least a connection. Like, if you are, for example, meeting a very prominent, like a very important character of a certain expansion, like Heavensward, for example, Estinian, right? For example, like certain characters, okay, a little spoiler alert here, will reappear again in another expansion. And not only will they reappear, but there will be some sort of conclusion to them or something. And this kind of conclusion is being already built up. And World of Warcraft, you also have certain conclusions that come with like later expansions about certain characters, like Sylvanas, for example, right? But a lot of stuff is disconnected, or you get something like 4 years ago or something like that, like an information about a certain character. And then the company, they believe after 4 years, the player still remembers what the heck happened and stuff like that. Like the way like the story is being delivered in World of Warcraft, not only does it take way too long to get like new info about certain characters or what their next plan is or what has become of them, But in addition, like even the quest is like in puzzles. Like when I'm doing, for example, time walking to level like a new character, and I do some campaigns, like let's say Cataclysm or something. Like yeah, there's like this issue going on. The world has been destroyed through the Cataclysm, and then I'm starting this zone. I'm helping out them. They have this kind of issue. Then I go to another zone. They have this kind of issue, but everything is like disconnected. And even like in Legion, like I'm recently also doing some time walking in Legion. I feel like some parts are so disconnected. Like you have your order hall, then you're helping them, but then there's like Hedgar, like the mage, he has like some issue, and they have some issue, your faction have some issue, and everything is just like so separate and stuff. At least in Final Fantasy XIV, like the story is like connected. Like even the characters that appear, they are like really part of the main plot. And I feel like this kind of connection doesn't exist as much in the story of World of Warcraft. What's really unfortunate, because I feel like the whole lore, like with the races and what's like going on there, is very fascinating. But the way it's delivered through gameplay and like quests and stuff is not as immersive, I would say, in my opinion. I feel like you can immerse yourself way more in the world of Final Fantasy XIV and what's going on, in my opinion.
Team players over to do the same in their game. You know, a little vice versa, a little Mikasa Sukasa. Let's all have some fun. Sukasa. Only to realize that getting everyone geared up would take so much time, it was basically impossible. This right here is one of the prime examples of how Final Fantasy XIV's game design principles have shifted over the years. Everything's about accessibility, which does not just refer to the skill floor to get into the game. It also refers into the time investment it would take to do the stuff that you want to do. Raiding is just one part of Final Fantasy XIV. You don't have to like everything else that the game has to offer. Most people just want the plot. Some people want to fish. Some people just want to play Mahjong. Some people just want to waste away in Eureka. And some fucking dumbasses do practically everything. But here's the thing. You don't have to do these things because the dev team is not holding you hostage and forcing you to.
Yeah.
You do these things because you want to. You think leveling isn't a grind? You want a long, grindy task? Go grind some old fucking relics, baby. You'll see a fucking grind. You think it sucks that you don't lose XP on death? Go into nerfed Eureka. It's still more hardcore than the rest of Final Fantasy XIV in terms of level difference between enemies and being unforgiving. It's also a grind. That is always my response to people who ask why the core game isn't a grind. Well, there's grindy shit to do if you want it. What's that? The game is too easy? Well, there is hard gameplay content that the majority of players never clear. If you sit around and say that the game is too fucking easy and you haven't cleared the current Savage tier and all the ultimates, I think your opinion is invalid. And then if you clear the current Savage tier and all the ultimates, I still think your opinion is invalid. They have stuff for everybody to do in this game, hard or grindy. You don't have to do anything, but you can do everything.
I feel like this is so good that you don't have this kind of pressure. And also, this is why I believe the community is so positive in Final Fantasy XIV, because there's no pressure. In World of Warcraft, some people are saying the community... I personally have good experiences with the WoW community. Like, people are really nice to me also from my guilds that I'm in and stuff, be it on the Alliance and Horde side, because I play on both factions, actually. And everyone is, like, nice to me, because I have, like, a good connection with certain people, right? And I will play with, like, friends and people I know most of the time. But... like, if you're like a casual player, for example, and you don't have like a strong guild connection, or you're like new, you have like probably with the community a way better time in Final Fantasy XIV than in World of Warcraft, for example, because the community is more relaxed and more forgiving, and you don't immediately get kicked out of a dungeon if you die a few times or you mess up. But in World of Warcraft, because it's so much also focused on the current expansions endgame content, like the latest raids and Mythic Plus runs, like the highest keys and stuff, like there's so much pressure that everyone needs to be like a freaking elite. You need to have the best gear and slot, you need to know every single rotation, you need to have a perfect DPS and healing and tank performance and stuff. Like there's so much pressure on currently in WoW, that some people are like suffocating from that. Like it's just too much pressure, and some people might even quit and stuff, right? Because it's too much about like the end game content that is like the current raids, like the latest, the M+ hierarchies, like the new Keystone Master. and each patch, like, your old gear becomes irrelevant because the item level gets higher and stuff. And I feel like you are, like, in a way, almost forced in WoW to always have the best gear and performance. Because otherwise, all your friends and people around you, they will do, let's say, M plus 19 keys, and you will still be on plus 11. And then they're like, oh, why would I do plus 11? You should get this and that and join me for my plus 19 or something. Like, that's what I'm seeing within the community I'm in. Like, seriously.
I, too, have benefited from the mass WoW exodus. I am not completely ignorant. I don't like that game, and I never will, because I don't really like MMORPGs, or at least the industry definition of what an MMORPG is. But you don't need the Misshapen Chair seal of approval to play a game and enjoy it. My opinion is completely irrelevant when it comes to your personal enjoyment. I don't need Final Fantasy XIV to demand that I waste all my time on it every day. I'll play the fuck out of it when there's stuff that I want to do. And when there isn't something that I want to do, I simply play other games that I also like on the side, like playing some Hunt Monster Up. I'd say it's a good thing that they don't just inflate the amount of time investment in this game to keep you subbed at all times. Unless it's housing. Stay subbed, buddy, or we're going to nuke your property. But you can already see the benefits of people enjoying their limited time in the game rather than dreading their mandatory time in the game. Final Fantasy XIV is only becoming one of the largest MMORPGs, and this whole change in game design is no small reason why. I might waste tons of hours in this game, but it's purely because I want to, not because I have to. Now that I'm done venting, I'm sure that this will be received very well. If all you want to do in something like Final Fantasy XIV is raid, you will be able to get through all of it eventually. It's not going to take a million hours, and then you'll have nothing else to do. That's okay. You don't have to grind out everything else. That's just not what this game is. It's totally acceptable to not remain subbed at all times because they, as in the dev team, don't want you to hate playing the game. You can absolutely get many more hours out of many other games, but gameplay hours alone do not make a great game, in my opinion. I'd much rather have a game be impactful for the small amount of time that I get to play it, rather than just have a bunch of shit to do for the sake of doing it. Final Fantasy XIV is the Doki Doki Literature Club of MMORPGs. Last thing to say before someone gets my words twisted, Final Fantasy XIV took a lot of inspiration from World of Warcraft. I am not denying that. That is the absolute
there are some similarities,
truth. However,
but it's still different.
Final Fantasy XIV has evolved from its roots into what it is today. Version 2.0 and version 6.0 are very different games.
Yeah,
just like version
really
1.0 and 2.0 being very different. And version 6.0 is the type of game that I like to play. Because when it comes to games, it's as simple as this. Don't tell me what to do. Now let's get out there and continue to complain that there's nothing to do in Final Fantasy XIV, the only game that exists on the entire planet.
You know what's interesting here? And this is something that, for example, also Skyrim and Minecraft offers. And Skyrim and Minecraft, so long, like for such a long time, a lot of people were playing, and those games were so hyped because, like, games that you can play and you can do like literally whatever you want, and you are not forced to do certain things, and you can just run around and explore or do like side missions all the time. Like those kind of games where you make the objectives of what you want to do, they tend to actually keep the players longer involved with the game and to enjoy the game. Like look at freaking Minecraft, for example, like for how long this game has been on top and really popular, and look at like how old some of the players like are in Final Fantasy XIV, like for how long they've been playing the game. Like I quite often run into players that have been playing the game for 7 years or even longer, and they never took like a break or so. Like it's crazy, it's really like that. Like there are a lot of old-time Final Fantasy XIV players that don't quit and they play for years, and they always wait for like a new expansion. But while they are waiting, and that's the funny part, while they're waiting for a new expansion like Endwalker, even those that already have finished like Shadowbringers, for example, like they will do other stuff. They will spend endless time in the gold saucer, for example. They will do fishing, they will do RP and stuff, and after like a certain amount of time, then a new expansion comes out and they just play the new expansion. But WoW, for example, I've experienced that too, and I've like talked to a lot of players, and I even remember like players that quit for some time and they came like a half year or a year back later. And the reason why they came back or why they quit is because they just wanted to wait for the new patch or expansion. You don't have that as much in Final Fantasy XIV because people, they don't wait out of the game, they wait inside the game for something new. What's quite surprising, right? No, I think it's a very good and positive game, but I think it's tough to actually sometimes compare MMOs with each other because it all depends on what the focus of a certain MMO is. In my opinion, yeah, Final Fantasy XIV does have very great dungeons and raids. They're very fun. I think the mechanics are interesting, where you have certain boss phases where you have to stand at a certain spot so you don't take damage. Then you have a phase where someone gets like marked with something and you must move away from that player, otherwise like it's a wipe and stuff. Like, I love the mechanics. I find them quite interesting in FF14, and it can definitely compete with like other MMOs like World of Warcraft, which also has some really cool raids and dungeons. And at the same time, it gives you a deep story that some other MMOs don't give you. Like, I think story-wise, my top MMOs are definitely Final Fantasy XIV and Elder Scrolls Online. I think the story in Elder Scrolls Online is also really good. But yeah, what do you guys think about Final Fantasy versus other MMOs? What do you love about Final Fantasy XIV? And what do you love more in other MMOs that Final Fantasy XIV does not have? For me personally, what I love about Final Fantasy XIV, what I can't find in other MMOs, and this was just as how Misshapen Chair described, like I can do whatever fuck I want in Final Fantasy XIV. Like I can do anything. I can go to Gold Saucer, I can do fishing, I can RP. Like I don't feel like pushed or forced to do certain things, like certain chores or something like that. I feel like more pushed to do this actually in, like, let's say World of Warcraft, for example, because of the weekly vault. So I feel like I must do M+ on this character this week, at least a plus 14 key or something like that, so I can get some good gear. And I have to do it maybe on 2 characters because I have this alt that also needs something, and it's just crazy. I feel like there's so many chores in WoW, and I don't have this in Final Fantasy XIV. This makes me feel more relaxed while playing it. But on the other hand, I love like the way I can have alts in World of Warcraft, and I'm a little bit disappointed in FF14 with that. Like in World of Warcraft, I can play on multiple factions. I can have an Orc Warlock, I can have an Orc Hunter, I can have a Human Mage, I can have a Goblin Shadow Priest, a Dark Iron Dwarf Paladin and stuff. Like I have so many characters and play on them and have like a different view from faction side and racial side and class side and stuff like that. In FF14 I have just like this one character, and sure you can have an alt as well, but the alts are a bit weird in FF14 because if, for example, if you buy like a house on your main account or certain things, you're like locked on your alt to buy something else or so. I feel like FF14 is not alt friendly at all in my opinion. And the fact that you can be any class on your main character makes it almost pointless to grind again. Like in WoW, at least, if you have like a certain character that's a class, you're just this class, right? And you max out on that character. And if you want to have another class, you just make a new character. And maybe you use like a different time walking campaign, experience something different. It's cool. I like that about WoW. I feel like the leveling experience is great in WoW. FF14 has the best story though. RP is nice, community is nice, and yeah, that's my opinion on those games and on other MMOs. And yeah, if you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget, hit that subscribe button for more content. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. And I will see you guys next time.